Hello, my name's Adam Shilton. I'm a founder, technologist, TEDx speaker, and I'm obsessed with answering the question, how can we become irreplaceable in the age of AI? So join me as we support you on your journey to becoming more prosperous, more purposeful, and more profitable. Please like and subscribe. In this episode, I talk with CJ Gustafson, founder of the Mostly Metrics newsletter and host of the Run the Numbers podcast. CJ previously served as a CFO for a number of fast growth companies before starting his own business. Our conversation covers how AI is impacting business efficiency without necessarily replacing jobs, why domain expertise matters more than ever, even with powerful AI tools, the importance of finding your authentic voice in content creation, common mistakes companies make when analyzing metrics and data, how customer onboarding directly affects retention and churn, the value of letting your brain make connections during downtime, what it means to be irreplaceable in the age of AI, and much, much more. So I hope you enjoy this wide-ranging conversation with CJ Gustafson. CJ, how's it going?
It's a pleasure to be here, Adam.
Very good. So we're going to get straight into the meat, as they say. Who is it that said that? I think it was Justin Welsh. You know Justin Welsh, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like Mr. Solopreneur. When I did his training, I was like, yeah, you always want to get into like the meat. You want to write the meat first, and then you want to do the headline, and then all that sort of stuff. So yeah, I like getting into the meat, right? So Mostly Metrics newsletter. You're all about the data and the metrics, obviously. So we don't have to talk about your journey just yet. We can get onto that a little bit later. But as a prior CFO, you spent a lot of time in the weeds, into the data. That's where the newsletter was formed from. So to kick things off, what do you think the biggest mistake is that people need to avoid with the data and the metrics that they focus on, especially now where people are cheating, right? People using AI to do everything. So like start there, CJ, kick us off. What are people doing wrong?
People are cheating. Where are they cheating, Adam?
You tell me.
I don't think anybody's cheating with AI. I think they're trying to make the most of it. I think what people are doing wrong with AI is setting weird expectations around it. And the way that I think AI is impacting the world of finance and just running companies in general is there are two different vectors, right? It can either impact the total headcount you need for a job to be done. And that's really clear in the world of like customer support, right? Everybody used to always complain about the chat bots that you would get and how it's just like this never-ending doom loop of you don't get the answer you need back. I think those have improved a lot, and you don't need as many people for like tier one customer support, like this simple break fix, forgot my login stuff. So that's like a clear use case. It's more ambiguous with the other parts of running a company where you get more efficiency gains, but it's like, how much am I going to get? Is it making a person 5% better, or is it making a person 200% better? And humans are really bad, I think, at trying to hone in on what that range of outcomes are, especially when they haven't had like the historical evidence to benchmark against. So like a use case for, I don't know, maybe like the engineering team is how fast can we review code after it goes through? There's like a certain speed at which you can normally do it, and then you can use AI to check for vulnerabilities, et cetera, and common things you might mess up. But at a certain level, like you may be making someone who is like a decent coder or code reviewer, like go from like a B- to like an A-, but it's not like they're 5 times better and they're 5 more people. So I think like just to summarize, with AI, I don't think people are cheating, but I do think that they have really crappy expectations about what they can get out of it.
I think that's so eloquently put. And I mean, I try and avoid the headlines because it's pretty easy to get into the weeds of, oh my God, like a company's just replaced an entire team. What? Like, what is life? What is my future? You know, all of that sort of stuff. And I think one of the recent updates was like Google admits to writing 25% of its code with AI or whatever. But actually, if you know a developer and you know a coder, and you gave the example of like, so like I'm not picking on developers or anything like that, right? It's just because that's where we were going. But if you speak to a good developer, like they are very time efficient. So
yeah.
they don't want to be writing from scratch. So even before AI, they'd go into GitHub or wherever it was, like they'd find a repo, like, and they'd first see whether somebody else has done this before. Like, who's done this before? Like, who's done like 50% of the heavy lifting, so I don't have to do this from scratch. And then you build your set of templates. Like, you've got like your base code that you always reference that you don't have to again write from scratch. So I think there's all of this sensationalist stuff in the headlines, because it's easier to start with the coding because like it's what AI does pretty well, right? But then when you actually get into the weeds, like developers were kind of already doing that before AI existed. And to your point, now it's faster. And I may be underselling that. Like, again, I'm not a developer. I know of developers, right? But I think right now it seems to be mainly speed. I don't think we're quite seeing job replacement
Yeah.
at the rate that the headlines would have us think. I don't know whether you'd agree.
Dude, what you said though around like developers using open source code for decades is so true. I used to work at a cybersecurity company that did security specifically for code. And I think the stat was like 80% of code relies on some sort of open source package, which basically means like it's the equivalent if you're a finance person and you're like kidnapping a formula from one spreadsheet to the other because you don't want to like rewrite a super long sum if. It's like we were doing that stuff anyway. So like what's wrong with it?
Yeah, it's like anybody who's ever gone into Python like is familiar with the concept of a library, and a
Yeah.
library is just referencing some code that somebody else has built. So they always say, and it's in the Bible, right? There's nothing new under the sun,
Yeah.
and I'm finding this now more with content, and again, that's a rabbit hole that we can get into in terms of AI generated content. And I read a really interesting article the other day about a dude who uses AI to write, but then he's got a framework to make sure that it's not caught by AI detectors and it like sounds like a human. So yeah, we can get into the weeds of that. But from my perspective, like there are very few new ideas. And if you listen to the the Mr. Beast Stephen Bartlett podcast on Diary of a CEO, which I recommend people check out, um, I can't remember the example that I was going to give there. But yeah, unless you can, that was it. If you can find the purple cow, the idea that nobody else has had before, like and Mr. Beast has had a couple of these, like paving the way for stuff that nobody else has thought of before. So of course it goes viral because they're like, oh, that's crazy, yeah, like I'm going to saw a table in half with a knife over like 5 days, or I'm going to shut myself on a desert island for 7 days, right? They're just so bonkers that people just don't think about them, right? But in reality, like 99% of the time, it's people just doing existing ideas better or even just putting their own spin on them, right?
Yeah, and you'd made a comment around like what do you have to be careful when it comes to metrics.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always said like as a finance professional that having more data doesn't necessarily make you smarter. In fact, it can cause analysis paralysis. I think there's a link to be made with AI now. There are a lot of tools like Cursor that are allowing you to spin up a prototype of something
Mm-hmm.
even faster. So, okay, you have faster iteration cycles, but like, what if what you're building is like a shitty idea to begin with, or like nobody wants it? Like, it doesn't replace that.
Yeah, that's it. Well, what if you just produce shit just faster, right?
Just faster, yeah.
it's,
Yeah.
it's still going to be shit. Like garbage in, garbage out is the term that's just used all the time, right? But yeah, that's it's the way that everything has always been, and the way that everything will always be is the quality of ideas. Yeah, and the only difference is going to be that, right, okay, well, I can be one person with some really good ideas that doesn't need as many staff now. Yeah, that doesn't
Yeah.
mean I've got to sack half my team. It just means that when I grow my business, like I'm less reliant on people.
And I've operated also at companies that are in the vertical software realm. So, for example, my most recent gig was at a marketplace for aftermarket car parts.
Mm.
So, like, you go to get your car fixed, they have to order the parts from somewhere. We were basically like the Amazon or Kayak behind the scenes for that. You have to like know how mechanics in a garage work,
Mm.
and you have to have earned experience from the automotive sector to build something they want.
Mm-hmm.
I think that there are a lot of people out there with AI who are probably building something quote unquote cool, but it's like, do you have the intimate earned secret of like how an auto mechanic works to build them something that they want? And it's also the same thing with like finance tools. There are a lot of people out there who are like, oh, finance is such like a huge TAM. We're going to build tools for that. It's like, have you ever closed the books before though? Like, have you ever worked like on an accounting team? absent that experience, I don't think like AI can just replace that. It can help you come up with a prototype, but like if it doesn't understand like how you close the books, it's not going to be a great product.
That's why I think, and this was the problem with my journey actually. We spoke about it a little bit before we started recording. And it's how we know each other. We connected because I was doing a lot of work in the finance space again, like vertical software, um, and I was producing content that I thought would resonate with my audience, which is great. And like, I'm not an idiot, or I like to think that I'm not an idiot in most areas. I'm sure I'm an idiot in lots of areas, right? But yeah, I was providing value. Like, if followers was the metric, then like, great. Like, I'm providing a ton of value because I'm getting like a load of followers, right? But it becomes very fatiguing, and actually you find that yeah, you can write for an audience, but will they actually pay you to solve a problem unless you've got a real grasp of their precise situation? So now I'm in a position where, right, I'm going to talk about like myself from the past, and that is a lot better because I know there's going to be validity and it's going to be more accurate because I can say, right, well, I've got 15 and a half years experience here. Like, I know that that is going to be the answer to that problem. Whereas if you're trying to engineer something based on a trend or something you think is going to work, like that could be a recipe for disaster if you don't have that domain expertise. And it's probably one of the main reasons why a lot of companies fail, is because they try and latch onto a trend. They figure out, oh shit, it's hard. I don't know my audience. I've got a rubbish offer. What's the next thing? And then you just get on this like endless treadmill of moving from one venture to the next. And hopefully I've come to that realization early so I can just double down now, but that's not the case for a lot of people, right?
Yeah, and I've opened up to you, but like when I started mostly metrics, I was writing for like this fictional smart person. I thought that was out there, and yeah, I mean, some of it made sense, I guess, on paper, and some of it probably did read as somewhat smart. But I mean, I think you get exposed like a paper mache suit in the rain eventually. Like if you don't truly live and breathe what you're talking about every day, and if you're not passionate about it, more importantly, because I think like consistency in any craft, like you have to be okay with the mundane every single day and be like interested in it to truly be great at anything. And if you're trying to like force it, you're gonna get so burnt out.
Yeah. Yeah, and I could not agree more. I mean, 90% of my LinkedIn posts like do below average, like, and it's just the ones that do well that like do you know what I mean, that keep the numbers going up. It's averages. Like, it's not that everyone is a hit. Like, when I send out my newsletter, which is nothing compared to yours, but some people don't open it. Like, sometimes it absolutely tanks, and if you don't enjoy the writing, you're pretty stuck, right? Because
Oh
like,
yeah.
you know the, the market is not going to reward you for just hitting post. The market's going to reward you for doing it consistently so people know what you're all about. And you can't go through those blockers of saying, oh shit, like 100 people unsubscribed that week, or like, oh yeah, like however many people unfollowed me, like, unless you actually enjoyed the subject matter that you're writing about, right?
Yeah, and it can be a grind, but you have to enjoy it. It's like anything. I mean, I enjoy running. I try to run most days, and a lot of times it is pretty boring, but there's something like comforting almost in that boring that you keep coming back to. And if you're writing, if you're podcasting, if you're building a business about something, like we said, a lot of people out there may be like, oh, I'm going to build the next ERP for finance. It's like, are you actually passionate about that? Because you're signing up for like a 10-year journey here.
Yeah, yeah, that's it. And so I always talk about Alex Hormozy, who's talked about way too much, because he is like, he just exploded. I mean, yeah, he got the format down. I remember the launch that he did when he launched $100 million leads, which is a great book. Don't get me wrong, but he just got every channel nailed, and he basically blew up the internet. But his premise is you've got to be happy doing the volume. Yeah, so that's where that consistency piece comes in. Um, and again, I'm losing my chain of thought here. We can come back to that, but yeah, essentially, there's a lot to be said for doing the boring stuff. Like, he talks about A/B testing because it's boring, right? Like, marketers don't want to do the A/B testing. They want to do the sexy messaging. Oh, let's try something new or go off in this direction. But in reality, it's just a case of saying, right, well, what if we just change this one word and see whether the results improve half a percentage? and then just doing that over and over and over again until you get to the point where like it compounds, right? So I like those examples. The Justin Welsh example is moving treadmills. Like, it was one of his most successful posts ever. Like, a dude that literally.
I read that one. The guy like moved like 7 treadmills in a day, and each one was like $500 or something.
Yeah.
And he's like, he made thousands of bucks. It's hard work though.
Yeah. That's it. And the comparison is like everybody wants to create this unicorn company, like the next Facebook or the next Amazon or the next Microsoft or whatever. But sometimes it's just about moving treadmills. That's how we signed it off. Like, you know, I know a ton of companies, like they do roofing or whatever, and like when I moved into my house, like somebody knocked on the door, like, oh, can I do your windows? Like, it charges like $15 a go, but then you've got $15 once a month from a few hundred properties on the estate. Like, you know, it's boring, but there's a ton of cash to be made, right?
Yeah, compounds over time too.
Yeah, absolutely. So sorry, we went off on a bit of a tangent there. So obviously the question was like AI cheating, which we latched onto. So we've said like AI isn't cheating; it's an enabler, right? I suppose to rephrase that question, and it comes back to what we're saying about domain expertise, right? Because you can't just have some like junior who's just come out of college and sit them in a finance seat and say, like, you are now our head of FP&A, and you are going to spot all of this amazing stuff from the data that we should be doing that nobody else has had time to do, just by giving them an AI tool. Now, of course, like, it's going to be better than nothing, right? Because like AI is at least going to, if you give it the right prompt, oh yeah, I've looked at this data, and like, you know, here's some ways that you think about forecasting, and here's some variables you need to consider, right? But it's somebody who's done that over time that can say, well, no, that's stupid. Like, why would you want to track that? No, that's pointless. So that was kind of where I was positioning that question, is maybe a better way of saying it is like, what is the mistake that somebody that doesn't have the battle scars going to be that people need to avoid, versus somebody who has been through the ringer, has looked at the metrics and the data for 10, 15 years? Do you have any recommendations there?
Well, I think it's like, what's your comfort level with putting things on quote unquote autopilot or trusting the outputs? Like, you can't have a dishonest system where you're putting in, like we said, like inputs that you didn't really think about, and then automatically just trusting the outputs because AI took a look at it. And the example that I go to is, I remember someone was telling me like, our accounts payable tool has like 97% accuracy. It's amazing. And I'm like, well, what about the other 3% of like wires that you do to the wrong people? Like, is that okay? Like, that's a use case where I think people get caught up and, oh yeah, we can put that on autopilot. It's like, I don't know if you want to.
Yes. What is the 3%? Like, if it was saying like, oh yeah, 3% of your payments might be inaccurate, like if it's a percentage of total payment, but if it's like 3%, but one of those payments could be 7 figures,
Yeah,
it's a different question.
yeah,
right?
you're out of luck, dude. Yeah.
There we go. So I mean, from your, and I know you've moved into newsletter and podcast now. We'll get onto that in a bit. So, but for anybody that's working towards your prior position, whereby, you know, they oversee finance and they're keen on moving into that more strategic position where it's like, because there's going to be less operational stuff, right? You know, as tech evolves, like, you know, people will be moving more towards, okay, how do we think rather than how do we do? So what are your recommendations to somebody who wants to take more ownership over what all of this data means to a business?
That's a good one. I think a lot of it is centralizing data. So like, I have a theory that there are a lot of teams within an organization that will eventually just merge to become one. So for example, FP&A and business intelligence are two groups within most companies. One helps with the budgeting and forecasting. The other takes all the data insights from the product, from the financial ledger, and from the CRM with sales. I think those will become one over time. So it's the ability to work with a ton of data and then being able to come back up to a really high level, right? Because you spend a lot of your day in the weeds looking at numbers on a specific deal or a point in time, but how do you change the altitude at which you fly at? And I think AI tools will help us go through many iterations on the ground level, but like, you still got to be the person who can come up for air and say, okay, what's the bigger takeaway here? And what's the so what?
That's it. So what? And not enough people ask themselves that question, because there's a difference. It doesn't matter whether it's data or anything else, but like if you've got a thing and there isn't a so what, then change doesn't happen. Yeah. So oh yeah, I've spent all of this time like with all these funky macros or using this AI tool, and I've managed to work out like, impressive metric to work out A, impressive metric to work out B, right? But then you present that to the board, and they're like, okay, what does that mean? So
Yeah, and I think it's in finance, I think it's in creating content, I think it's in any sphere where there's some sort of output that people want to make decisions. There are a lot of people who can find interesting things, but there's a difference between making something interesting and something impactful that you can make a decision using.
And yeah, I mean, we could do an entire podcast on what it means to make an impact at board level, I guess. But A, would people be interested in that? B, well, maybe, yeah. There's probably some listeners thinking, no, I really want to know about that, right? But I think there's going to be this interesting point where, and I don't know how it's going to work out, because you tend to, and I'm speaking in generalizations here, right? But you tend to find that people that are good with numbers aren't necessarily as good with the soft skills and the people skills. And again, I'm speaking in generalizations here. It's like introvert versus extrovert, logic versus creative, all of that sort of stuff. People always said to me, oh, you're a good musician, you must be really good at maths. Which again completely spun me around, because I was like, well, no, creative versus logic. But they're like, oh no, like you look at piano keys, like a semitone is just like a number on a scale. So if you can like plot the right numbers, whether it's a guitar fretboard or whether it's a piano, like math helps because it's just pattern recognition. And I thought, okay, that makes sense. But then when it comes to like business context, will somebody who's perfectly happy to spend 4 hours getting into the weeds of the data be just as happy in a presentation environment, being able to communicate what they mean? So I think there's going to be this weird situation where we're going to have like data scientists that are going to need to learn how to present if the team stays lean. I think in large organizations for the time being, it's still going to be like operational versus strategic presenters, I guess. But yeah, I don't know what's coming. I don't know whether you've got any thoughts on that, but I think there's going to be maybe a fundamental conflict of interest at some point when that's going to have to be figured out, right?
I think that conflict, though, has always existed in all organizations. So, like, if you talk to any chief technology officer, they do no coding, right? They just manage people at that point. I think it's just accelerating that trend. Like, if you look at a CFO, they'll go into a spreadsheet to check stuff, but I mean, they're not formatting raw data tables anymore. So, I think the higher up in any org, in any company, in any sector, it's less about doing the thing that got you there and more about managing people in a process.
And I guess that's the other takeaway, isn't there? Like the thing that got you there. Coming back to the battle scars, I'm sure there's plenty of people that end up at C-suite by being good influencers, without the technical chops. But I think that's going to become less and less. And again, comes back to that domain expertise, right? Like if the organization of the future isn't operational, it's literally just C-suite, right? CFO, COO, CEO, CTO, blah, 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 blah. They're going to need some sort of domain expertise until the point that AI gets so intelligent that it doesn't matter anymore, and like people don't really matter. Do you know what I mean?
I don't think we'll ever have orgs that are just C-suite. That would be, I mean, who are they managing at that point? Like I don't think that's a real thing.
But I'm thinking, so I'm thinking, and it's a thought experiment. Like I don't believe either way, right? But I always remember back to Sam Altman saying, "I believe that we're going to have a one-person billion-dollar business." Yeah, and I mean, I guess there's a future where, like, if you do have a solopreneur business, like that's fine. Like, there's me, and there is tech, but that might not be the future of every business, right? And the reason I say like C-suite example is if it's just somebody with very specific domain expertise that's got access to a variety of PhD level AI agents to do the operational stuff. I'm not saying it'll happen, but as a thought experiment, it could be possible if the tech gets to that point.
Yeah. Yeah. I think like what's happening is there are different lanes for people to take that weren't there before. And I think that's what you're hinting at.
Mm,
Like you can stack a bunch of skills that maybe you were 80th percentile in.
mhm,
But if you put them together, it creates like a category of one and you could build that
mhm,
company that's worth, I don't know, a lot of money that would have taken a lot of people before. But to that point, you can't just do one thing really well. You have to be kind of a jack of all trades with some sort of um, some sort of view on something special, like we said before, whether it's sector expertise or something you picked up along the way that makes you uniquely qualified to solve a problem.
yeah. And again, uniquely qualified to solve a problem. Yeah. And that's reminded me of what I was going to say when I started talking about Alex Hormozy, who I'm going to mention again, for God's sake. Um, it was he's spoken about it on podcast, but he did a post. But it was essentially like, do not profess to be an expert in what you haven't done before.
Yeah,
That's essentially what it is, right? Like, and then the other side of that is only listen to people who have done the thing that you want to do. And I think there's
yeah,
a lot of truth in that.
yeah. I think so too. Like you probably shouldn't hire a private wealth manager who's like not doing well. You know, you probably shouldn't hire a personal trainer who's not in shape. I totally agree with that.
Yeah, yeah. But on the and again, this is where AI can potentially be used for sinister reasons, right? And I'm not gonna mention the name of the company, right? But I was doing some competitor analysis the other day, and everybody knows now that the framework for having a valid business is solid offer, i.e., something of value to provide, and then credibility, which is okay, right? Who have you done this for? Like, prove it, and that's where testimonials and case studies come, right? But of course, now like anybody can build a website, like anybody can create a fake testimonial with 5 stars. So it's like more important that obviously you've got legitimate people that you can point towards the company that they work for, that people can say, there they are, go check them out, whether it's a video or whatever it happens to be. But this company, I mean, yeah, granted they were testimonials, but a lot of them either weren't at all related to the ICP that they were going for right now. Yeah, so completely different audience. And then secondly, like half of them then ended up working at the company that they created the testimonial for, right? They were freelancers that then ended up working for the company. And it sometimes happens, right? Case in point for me, like the work I'm doing, like I was in the training course and now I work for the company. Like so yeah, it happens, but people just need to be careful that they are doing their due diligence when they invest in this new stuff. Like, say it's another like verticalized SaaS software that some 17-year-old in their backyard's been developing. Like, you just need to make sure that you're doing your due diligence before you're procuring this sort of stuff because it is becoming blurry.
I think that example though is just a shady person, which has been around
Mm,
since the dawn of time. That wasn't necessarily tech enabled. I
yeah.
mean, they're going to be grifters in anything. Like if you look at the last crypto wave, like how many people in Miami were spinning up things that were non-existent. Like it's since the dawn of time. Like if you look at the 2000s and 1990s from the early web stuff, that was like total vaporware. Like I don't think that's something that's native to AI at all. I mean, there's going to be shady people and everything.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's right. And I remember one of the first ever jobs I had. We did we did an event. So it was I was selling luxury bedding at the time, like mattress toppers that like stop you overheating. Like basically,
Like an eat sleep
yeah,
type
yeah,
thing.
that's it. Like turns a crappy mattress into a good mattress, like cheaper than buying a new mattress. That was the but we could custom size them. So if you had a camper van, like you could send us the measurements and we'd
Yeah.
make them so they'd fit on your like mobile home bed or whatever. It worked really well, like and it still exists to this day. But we went to this event that was like I think it was literally just a caravan event. So you could buy a new caravan there, or you could like because people love like motorhomes, caravans. Like masses of people go to these events to see, oh, what accessory can I add to like my VW camper van, or like what stuff do I need that I didn't know exist that I could, you know what I mean? It's like, well, it's not quite a cult, but you know what I mean? There's a lot of people that really love motorhomes. And we had a stand set up and people could like fill out the dimensions of theirs and whatever. And it was a bit dodgy at the time. It was before card systems, really. So we had people actually write their card details down. So we shredded all of that afterwards because, of course, like, you know, as soon as policy then got enforced, like, we're like, well, bank details shouldn't be keeping those. But the reason I tell that story is because the exhibitor next to us was telling us about somebody who'd been at the last event that was selling timeshare. I think it was in Spain or something like that. So the offer was something like, limited availability for this new site that's being constructed in Spain. Like, if you put 2.5K down, it will secure your spot, and then we'll let you know when it's ready to obviously, you know, spec up and, you know, take the other details or whatever it happens to be. So this dude was taking like 2.5K from whoever he could like pull out from the crowd, like making like tens of thousands of dollars from that one event. And then he just disappeared off the face of the planet. He traveled over to Spain to take pictures of this complex that existed, but it wasn't his. And then he'd just blown up those pictures onto a display stand at this event and taken money off of people. It was absolutely mad. But as you say, like, people still do that now. You know, it's an AI hasn't changed that. Like, if you're a nasty human being, maybe nasty is the wrong word, but if your upbringing is not you know, whatever, then yeah, people still have that rip-off mentality, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it's just human nature. Like, there's always going to be someone who's looking for an angle in anything.
Yeah. I did actually speak to somebody from a crypto company the other day.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and he's really struggling because, like, he's a nice guy, like, and he's kind of like crypto consultant / investor, and he's really struggling because, like, legitimate crypto businesses are really struggling with the whole shtick that's come from all of these companies that have popped up and basically, as you say, like, then disappeared because they were all con men, right? So, and it's the same way that, like, salespeople get off the back of bad salespeople. You know, there's like a few really bad stories that then alter that perception for the rest of the market. But I know nothing about crypto, so don't ask me about that.
I don't profess to be a crypto like person who knows much about it at all, but I will say, just coming from the finance world, the phishing schemes are getting really, really good.
Yeah.
And I probably get, so like, I think when I became a CFO, there must have been all these people who were filtering for people who were like within their first 3 months of being a CFO. And they're like, we're just going to go at them hard. And so it was like text messages to employees, emails to employees, fake DocuSigns that were sent to me because like they're looking for, oh, this person's vulnerable, they're new to the job. And then, I mean, even in my personal life, like I probably get 3 texts a day saying like, your FedEx like account has expired, like deposit money into it. So it's just, I guess for a lot of these scammers, it's like a numbers game. Like, how can I increase my surface area for someone just to finally give me money?
There must be a decent amount of people that fall for it for them to still do
That's
it.
what I always say, Adam. Like, if they're sending this money, it means it must be successful.
It's the same with like spam email or spam post. You know, that, like, you know, I'm not an advocate of spam, but I do think that small businesses should have an outreach mechanism. You know, especially when you're building, like, you don't have an infinite marketing budget, right? So you do need a mechanism to get your message in front of people, whether it's social, email, phone, whatever it happens to be. Like, I think businesses do need an outreach mechanism. But there's a difference between a courteous message that says, I think I can solve this problem for you. Is it worth a chat? Versus, like, I'm a Nigerian prince. Can you transfer me like $10,000 into this bank account, right? But it must work for some people for them to do it. Like, it's absolutely mad.
Yeah.
Really quick, guys, as you know, I don't have sponsors on the show. So to help me, it would be great if you could share with just one other person, leave a review, give a thumbs up, and subscribe. It really does make a difference. Now back to the show. Okay. Right, so that took a bit of a turn into sort of the cybersecurity territory, didn't it? So we did say this conversation might be a bit wide-ranging. So let's move on to what you're doing now, because
Sure.
I've grilled you on some of the finance stuff at least. So you've got Run the Numbers podcast. and then a very successful newsletter in mostly metrics. So firstly, run the numbers. I was looking at the blurb for that. It says you want it to act as a playbook for the stuff that you wish you'd known earlier in your career. So I'd love a couple of examples, and then obviously people can check out the podcast. But what would you say are some of the key things that you'd wish you'd known earlier on?
Yeah, so I came up doing the budgeting and the finances for companies that were growing really fast, and I wanted to become a CFO.
Mhm.
And there are a lot of problems within that world that like have a known solution. You just have to ask the right people. And executives are essentially like paid for the playbooks that they have that they can implement because they can see around corners. And so the premise of the podcast is most of the time I'm interviewing successful CFOs and asking them questions about their decision-making frameworks, about scaling companies, about the metrics they use to gauge progress. And it's been formative for me just as someone who's curious in that and wants to learn. And it's also just fun talking to people who are great business minds, who have thought through really tough problems and who have taken companies from one stage to another that like it's a pretty rare story. And so that's been a really good time. And then once a week, I also just jam out on what else might be happening in the tech world as it relates to running businesses and making money. So it could be an IPO that's occurring. It could be a company that raised a lot of money. So it's kind of scratching my own itch.
Very good. Cool. And anything, so you mentioned you talk about tech a little bit there. That's kind of my background and where I come from. So any recent conversations that people need to be aware of in terms of trends, anything interesting that you're seeing that's up and coming? Because from my perspective, as somebody who lives and breathes tech every day, like I struggle to keep up. Like there's a new company that's launched every like 2 hours.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of some of the recent conversations I've had. I just spoke with Sanjay Datta, who is the CFO of a company that does mortgage verifications in the US. They're publicly traded. It's called Upstart. And he had previously managed Google's ad business before doing that. It was like an $80 billion ad business. So a lot of that was just like lessons around like, hey, you have really good technology. How do you sell it? And how do you scale the org over time?
Yeah.
But I've talked to CFOs of all different kind of tech backgrounds. Like I've talked to the CFO of Calendly. I talked to the CFO of Spirit Airlines. I talked to the CFO of Klaviyo. And every once in a while, I'll also talk to the investors that fund them just to see like what they're thinking on the other side of the table. One of the more interesting conversations I had recently was with Mark McCaffrey, the CFO of GoDaddy.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a fun one because like everybody knows GoDaddy for the domains and like the Super Bowl commercials in the US. But what I didn't realize was how much they had done to help small businesses like start. It's like, we'll give you the domain, but then we'll help you do the next 8 things. And I think that's just a really good lesson for anybody who's building a business. Like, how do I serve the next customer need that's linked to what I already gave them?
Mm. Yeah, and there's a lot to be said for good onboarding and good customer experience, not customer service. And this was great. I was reading a book about it the other day. Like customer service could be argued as reactive, whereas customer experience is something you go out of your way to deliver at a high level, right? And
Well
yeah,
put.
GoDaddy, yeah, they're great. I remember it was a blessing and a curse at the time. So I think GoDaddy have got an agreement with Microsoft. So GoDaddy can provide Microsoft Office, but it's a GoDaddy version of Microsoft Office. So when I was in the Dynamics space, we couldn't integrate with GoDaddy's version because it was a stripped down version of Office. I don't know whether that's still the case. But you're dead right in terms of, right, well, what can we do next? Like I got a message through the mail the other day, like it had been a year since I've formed my business. Like, oh, how can we help support your like funding needs for the next step or whatever? So I'd agree, but I find that it's a little bit easier for tech companies, especially if you've got a freemium offering, because you can very quickly get people onboarded onto the platform, and then you've got the data of how they interact with the platform, so that you can then make more informed decisions about where you want to guide that user after they're already on the platform. Guy I had on the podcast, Jacob Bank, he's just released an AI agent platform. And that's exactly what he's all about. Like, how do I create content that educates to the point where I get them as a free member of my platform? And then how do I provide an immense amount of value after they're on the platform to make sure that they either pay or at least tell the next person, oh, this is the the best thing since sliced bread, right? So yeah, I think there's a lot to be said for product-led marketing. But of course, on the flip side, you've got more traditional businesses where like there is no freemium offering, either like your service or like your tech that requires implementation. It's not just a case of getting a trial and getting going, right?
Yeah, I think every leader that I talk to, whether they're a finance background or something else, like they intimately understand the customer journey
Mm.
and like what steps along the way you need to gauge if they're going to be a sticky customer. And then also to your point, like predicting what their next need is so you can serve them. And that all starts with understanding your customer. And that's not just like a finance thing. It's not just a marketing thing. It's just being a good steward of your business.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, that same book, I can't remember the name of it, but it's the one that gave the analogy between customer service and customer experience. They were saying that every customer goes through 8 phases when they start working with you within the first 100 days. It's not always the first 100 days, just a round number, right? But generally, I mean, you made a point earlier about like CFOs within 90 days being vulnerable or whatever it happens to be. It's generally those first 3 months that a lot of stuff happens when people move roles or anything like that. But it's the same for customers. So, like, when a customer procures something from you, especially if they pay money, they're then thinking, okay, right, have I made the right decision? So there's this kind of this initial phase after they paid an invoice where they're thinking, I hope these guys deliver on the expectation that they've set
Hey,
with
you
us.
got to cross that chasm.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of companies just don't do that well because there is that much of a gap between sales process and after sales that customers are kind of almost forgotten about in that interim period until there's a kickoff or the project starts or whatever it happens to be. So there's some shocking stats in there to say churn for businesses that don't have a really good sales handoff are vulnerable because a lot of their customers are just going to churn within that 100-day window, right? And then obviously there's the next emotional stage, which is okay, right? Well, we need to get them validated, like, and then it moves all the way to obviously evangelist, where they're like raving fans and speaking quite highly of you, right? But I think it's a big gap, especially now the world's moving towards SaaS. As customer acquisition becomes easier, and I don't think customer acquisition is going to become easier. I think actually it's going to become harder. But assuming you can get the customer acquisition piece sorted, the next piece is then obviously customer churn, and people don't think nearly enough about it.
I write about churn a lot on
Mm.
mostlymetrics.com, and I think that there are two types of churn that people don't dig into. The first is, what was it actually an onboarding issue? So did I sign this person up and like they never fully like integrated with the product, they never got it set up, they never experienced the value, because like that's a fundamentally different problem than did they churn because like they ran out of budget, did they churn because a competitor came up that could serve them better for a cheaper price? Did they churn because like your champion at the company left?
Mm.
So like there are all different types of churn out
Mm.
there.
And I've seen some really good stuff recently. So a lot of what I do is sales and marketing tech. So like if you're a small business, like want to book more meetings, okay, right. Well, you need the tech in the background that's going to support you go to market, get the message in front of people, right? And one of the platforms is Apollo.io, and it's probably come up in the companies that you've analyzed or
Yeah, I use it.
yeah, absolutely. Like they're a big company now. More recently, they've got competition from Clay, and Clay have done a really good job because they've sort of swept up the influencer and affiliate marketing side of things. Like there's a lot Apollo that Apollo can do that Clay can do, but obviously Clay seems to have nailed it with like this kind of everybody on YouTube speaking about Clay right now. So they seem to have the lion's share of the attention right now. But anyways, I was in Apollo because I mean I've got a couple of different emails. Like if I get a new email, if I'm working with a different client, obviously it's a different Apollo account. So I've seen the way that onboarding process has evolved from when I was using it 3 years ago to when I signed up for it last week, for example. And they're now building credits into the onboarding process. So Apollo is a credit-based system. So like if you want to find somebody's email, you consume a credit. If you want to use X amount of AI tokens, then it's all set up in the billing in the background. You can see what you're consuming at any one time. But Apollo now reward you for completing the onboarding process. So they say if you set up the integration with your Gmail, we will give you 100 free credits on top of your existing plan. So it just shows the amount of effort that some of these companies are needing to go to just to make sure that people finish the initial onboarding. It's mad.
Well, it's well thought out in the sense that they're incentivizing people to
Yep.
get to a certain outcome. I mean, you even see it with like corporate travel products. They'll offer the employee like a $500 credit for them to use personally. So it's like the ends justify the means with some of that onboarding stuff. It's like, how do you just get them down the funnel in a way that's ethical to experience the value that you believe your product can deliver?
Yeah, absolutely. And then you've got other stuff like what Clay does pretty well is like the 1 of 5 email sequence. And I think it's quite good because in the subject, like it quite clearly states, this is email 1 of 5. You are going to be getting 5 emails from us. So in terms of transparency, that's good. But then of course, each one of those emails relates to where you should be at that process. And it kind of like, there's a psychology element there. Like if you get email like 2 of 5 and it says, oh, by now you should be doing this, and you haven't logged on, you're thinking, yeah, I should really be doing that. I'm going to go back
Yeah.
in and I'm actually going to do what I should be doing, as opposed to just like signing up, having a look at a couple of screens and then just disappearing until the trial ends and then deciding whether I'm going to spend money or not. But yeah, I'd say 99% of the examples for me, just because I use a lot of this tech, like I ignore the onboarding and then it then becomes a decision at the end of the 14 days or the 30 days, like, am I going to pay the money or not? Which is detriment to me because in reality, I just end up spending more time like trying to work out whether I should invest, whereas I should have just gone through the damn onboarding, right?
Yeah, totally.
No, very good. Cool. So mostly metrics. You mentioned it a couple of times. So you're now, I say you mentioned it, we mentioned it a couple of times. So you're now doing the newsletter on the podcast full time, which is excellent.
Yeah.
Congratulated before we jumped onto that, because it's no mean feat to be able to say, right, well, I'm self-sufficient now. So how's that feel? Must feel pretty good, right?
Yeah, thank you, sir. It's been a wild ride. I mean, to go back, like I've been writing online for over 4 years. And so many people look at it like, oh, it's an overnight success. It's like, well, I was also writing at a point where like I couldn't get my mother-in-law or my dog to subscribe. So part of that journey, I think, was finding audience market fit. And that's like serving a need of like a real person that was out there and helping them do their job better so they can make more money. And that was like when I fully connected the dots on what type of content people wanted. And it was also applying stuff that I knew from having done the role before, whether that was helping to scale software companies, whether it was helping to allocate resources to know how many people we need to hire. So talking about stuff like I actually knew in a way that was like, and if you know, then you know. And that, I think, is when you know people want to lean in and be a part of what you're building, because you're speaking to them on like a visceral level, like, oh yeah, I've been through that too.
Yeah, it's really good, and you can see in the way that you write that it is you. Like it's not just like pre-canned newsletter how-to content. You know, you see it. You see a
I
lot.
try to inject personality into it because I think like most CFOs have a personality that's closer to like a cardboard box, and I wanna change that stereotype. I think that a lot of CFOs out there are great storytellers. They fully understand how a business brings a product to market, and like, why not have fun with it too? A lot of people try to be overly academic, and I think it's because they want to create this wall that is saying like, oh, I'm smarter than you, but like that's no way to make friends. Like you want to pull that wall down and create an on-ramp.
Yeah, one of the best newsletters that I've subscribed to recently, and I bought his book as well. It's called Very Good Copy.
Okay.
It's about copywriting, funnily enough. And the book is also called Very Good Copy. And it is Eddie. I'm finding his second name because I always pronounce, so Eddie Schleiner, Shleyner. So Very Good Copy. And he very much speaks in his own voice. And the majority of his newsletters are like 300 words or less, because the whole premise is like, why say in 3,000 words what you can say in 300 words? And I
Yeah.
think if you can latch onto that primary focus and say, this is this theme in my voice for today, I think that's 99% of the job done, because I think now more than ever, people are craving that perspective and that lived experience versus just another like framework. And I know you used to do that, right? So my newsletter used to be framework-based newsletters because I couldn't inject that element of experience and perspective on it. Like I'd hope now that my newsletter is better because there is a story and there is an element of perspective, and that clearly comes through in your writing.
Thank you. I think there are a lot of newsletters and books out there on strategy, and it's kind of cheap, right? It's like I'm just talking about something high level. You could Google it and just copy and paste in some stuff that sounds smart, add a little bit of your own tone, but like tactics are what get a job done. Like there aren't many books written on tactics.
Yeah. And also if you can lead somebody to that aha moment, I find that it often comes in the form of a story. Like whenever I read a book or a blog or a newsletter or whatever, like, so my process at the moment, and because I do try and read as much as I can, so all of my newsletters go into Readwise, which is an app, funnily enough.
Yeah, I use Readwise. It's really good.
So good. So the reason I like it is also if you use Kindle and you highlight notes, it also syncs the notes through to Readwise, and you get like a daily refresher of your highlights. So it comes down to like spaced repetition, whereby you don't just read something and forget about it. You are like shown those insights that obviously meant something to you when you highlighted them on a repeat basis, so that you internalize those concepts. And I think it's a really good system. So yeah, the newsletters I'm subscribed to, they go into Readwise. And then if I get a Medium update, so I get a daily Medium email that says like, oh, here's something that might be interesting. I like pick 3 of the Medium links, but I don't read them then. I use the Readwise browser extension just to drop them into my reader so I can just pick them up later. So again, for my brain, it works if I just have everything in one place, so I just read in one go. Otherwise, I just get sidetracked by emails. But whatever I read, the highlights are generally a story or a quote or an anecdote, because in reading it, I'm thinking, yes, that strikes a chord, that resonates with me. And the memorability of something that's concrete, that has a story, that's got an emotional element to it that you can then translate into your own work, is a lot more useful than facts, figures. Yeah, step by steps are good, especially if you've got like acronyms and stuff. But it's the stuff that makes it real, as you say, the stuff that's visceral, that I think really helps people. And you've got to inject the human into that for it to really hit home.
Yeah, I mean, like, I can't memorize many facts without a story behind it, right? And facts are also just like, okay, what do I do with it? And I think the story, to back to what we were talking about earlier in the combo, it helps bring out the so what, you know? Like, it has to drive impact in some way. And storytelling is as old as time. Like, I think like the best people in finance are the ones who can use numbers as like a character in the story, but not like, the plot itself. So yeah, I totally get where you're coming from.
So what's your writing process? How long does it take you? Do you have like a research phase? Is it like, do you have a structured system? I mean, you don't have to give away any secrets, but I'm curious because it takes me ages to write a newsletter.
I don't have like a hard and fast system. I think like it's just it becomes. I mean, I'm on a treadmill where I'm putting out 4 pieces a week, and at that clip, you just have to go through the world with like a certain lens that you view things through. And I took that from Ben Thompson of Stratechery, who I read a lot. And he's like, listen, you just like need to be able to see the world through a view that it's like, how does this end up in a newsletter somehow and tell a story and be useful to someone? And the biggest hack for that has been having the podcast. The podcast will help me get ideas from people smarter than myself, and then I can then riff on top of them or apply it to something that I saw or heard in my own life. So it's really just like stacking these different elements of what you view throughout the day, and then just seeing it through the lens of what's interesting to me and then what will be helpful to my audience.
And it's such a good way of doing it. Like what you're talking about there is essentially like a waterfall content premise. So you're taking this long form piece of content where there's a ton of ideas, and you're saying, right, well, that could be 4 newsletters, or that could be X amount of social.
Oh yeah,
right. So yeah, it's a really efficient way of doing stuff. Plus, having conversations, and I never get more ideas than when I go out to see somebody or I have a conversation with somebody like this, like, because you get those connections in your brain that you wouldn't by just going through stuff that's already in there. There's a great book called Still Like an Artist by Austin Kleon.
it's one of my favorite books.
Yeah, absolutely. And like the whole process behind the way that like that idea capture happens, like, and him splitting his workplace between like, this is digital work and this is paper-based work where I'm just going to doodle and try and like get some stuff out of my brain, I think is a really good way of looking at the world. And it comes back to what we were saying, right? There's nothing new under the sun, but there are a lot of new and unique perspectives that you can inject into your content
Yeah.
that people really value.
I love working for myself now. The struggle is how to give myself room to breathe, because when you work for yourself, you always want to be producing something that can be revenue generating and,
Yep.
and move things forward. But like walking the dog, I have to remember like, okay, take a breath here and let like your brain connect the dots. Cause like to your point, you talk to people, but then you have to like synthesize what came out of it. So I do have to step back and be like, okay, just let your brain like subconsciously like make connections here.
Yeah, that's it. And that's so when I did the TEDx talk last July, I had to stop myself from rehearsing the day before, because I knew my brain was going to need time to let all of those ideas fuse.
Mm.
And it was really useful, actually. Yeah, it wasn't perfect, but it meant that I didn't have to read through the script like 3 times backstage, like panicking about going on stage. Like I woke up thinking, no, like obviously I'd done enough prep beforehand so that it was pretty much there anyway. So like if I just done a day of like rehearsing and then left a day to to
What
let it
was the
sink in.
talk on?
So the talk is called "How Technology Can Enable a Rockstar Career That Makes Money."
Hmm.
So it's basically the story of how I released my first guide online, but with a tech emphasis. But it's a thought experiment as well, so it also ties to my music background. So the ultimate question, again, it's a thought experiment that says like, what if I had the technology that I have now back then when I was deciding whether I'd do music or whether I'd go down the corporate career? So like, it's not for everyone. Like I've had good feedback. Like it's got a few thousand views on YouTube. It was going to be an editor's pick, which I got really excited about. But then Ted decided, oh, well, we're just going to launch it as normal. So like I missed out on like 10x the reach just because of some sort of admin error. So I was really annoyed about that. But at least I've got a TED talk out, so I'm not too bothered about that. But coming back to your point there about letting the ideas fuse, and I can't remember what book it was. I don't think it was in Still Like an Artist, but there is a method whereby you almost do like this brain dump. So as you say, like you're on the treadmill, like you're running at a million miles an hour, you think, right, well, I need to get the next thing out. Like I will sacrifice dog walk, exercise, eating, whatever it happens to be, so that I can produce more. Whereas in reality, if you were just to get to the end point and think, right, my brain is full now, and then I think the framework is something to do with like asking yourself the question. And it is from like somebody like really famous, and it's annoying me that I can't remember exactly, but it's basically write everything down and then finish what you've written with a question that you want to answer. Yeah. And then whilst
Oh,
doing
then let your
whatever.
brain do it.
Yeah,
That's cool.
absolutely. You know, so it's exactly what you're saying, but the framework from that book was essentially do a brain dump, get everything out, and then just finish it with a question, so your brain knows to work on that question when it's on autopilot. And for me,
Yeah.
it's stupid shit like cleaning. It's really weird.
Oh, I love washing my car.
That's it. Like you know,
Vacuuming the car, like washing it for some reason, it's like cathartic.
yeah. Yeah, that's it. So anything that there is a process, and it's all to do with your hands, I find. And oh, there was a great quote, it's something to do with mindfulness. It's like something like busy hands take care of idle minds or something like that. I can't remember, but anything that you use
Mm.
your hands for gets you more out of your head. It's the same with exercise. If you can get like really into whatever sport or exercise you do, and that really helps you stop overthinking stuff. But yeah, so for me, cleaning or cooking, that's another one. Like few things get my brain to switch off, like cooking, because again, it's a recipe, it's a process. Now I'm going to chop this, then I'm going to do that. And the other recommendation from Very Good Copy was do stuff that also doesn't involve the thought process. So sometimes using cooking as the example, I've got to think quite hard. Like, A, what am I cooking? B, what's the recipe? C, am I going to look up the recipe? And immediately you're kind of in, like that's effort, right? You know.
Yeah.
Whereas if you got meal plan and you just start on the recipe, it's a lot easier. But he says stuff like painting by numbers, like making Lego with instructions. You're doing stuff with your hands, like you're creating stuff, but you're being told what to do. So you literally don't need to use your brain, and he finds that really useful to get through those sort of intense times of emotional and mental turmoil by saying, right, somebody else tell me what I'm going to do, like instructional creative work.
I think I'm gonna go downstairs after this and steal my 3-year-old daughter's coloring book and just let it rip for a while.
Yeah, you should do. Absolutely. And I had to take it apart because I smashed it. Like, this desk is rubbish, I need a new one. But I had a Lego bonsai tree. It's like adult Lego, and I love doing that so much. Like, so I need more adult Lego, I think. But yeah, paint by numbers. I used to do those like scraping pictures as a kid. You know, like the black.
Yeah, those are fun.
Yeah, and you get like the little scalpel and you just scrape out the shape. So they're pretty cool. But yeah, I think, you do need to find time to be a kid as an adult. Like, and if you've got kids, it helps. I don't know whether you've got any kids, but yeah.
Yeah, I've got 2.
Yeah, there we go. How old are yours?
3 and 1.
Yeah, there we go. 2 and 4.
Oh, there we go. You're in the thick of it.
So it's like an opportunity to like pay attention. Right. Well, what are they doing? Exactly as you just said, right? Well, I want to do some coloring. I did it with the kids over Christmas. Like, I printed out some like color me in reindeers. It was really cool.
I love it.
There we go. So anyway, like we've been going for an hour, CJ. The question that I like to answer or ask now is on the subject of irreplaceability. So we talk about AI quite a lot on the podcast. It just kind of happens. Like, it's not engineered that way. It's not like an AI podcast. But I spend a lot of time thinking about what is going to make me and my kids irreplaceable in this new world. So it wasn't on the questions I sent you, I'm sorry. But if you could try and explain what it means to you to be irreplaceable, what would you say?
I don't think AI will, like, I had a coach and he said, you may have the recipe, but you don't have the ingredients. And what I think he meant was there's like a million ways to try to act like something or to create something that may seem real or may seem authentic, but like no one can out you. And like, I think about that with my newsletter, like okay, you can go ahead, create another newsletter on metrics, create another podcast interviewing CFOs, but like I bring me to the table, and that's a rare stack of skills. And it's not for everybody, and I'm not the smartest at anything, but like to be irreplaceable, I think it's like leaning into the ingredients that make you. Like AI can give people the recipe, but like I've read a lot of stuff that AI produces, and I don't know, it doesn't hit the same. So I think it's just leaning into to what makes you authentically unique.
What makes you you? No, I think that's great. That's so good, and I agree. Which is A. So where can people find out more about you, CJ?
Sure. Go to mostlymetrics.com and you'll be able to find the podcast, which is called Run the Numbers, on there as well. And then I'm also, do people still use Twitter these days? CJ Gustafson 222. I don't know why I created that name when I was like in 7th grade, but that's it. Or on LinkedIn, CJ Gustafson.
That's fine. And I'll link to them in the descriptions and the notes and all that sort of stuff as well. So yeah, check out CJ. I think, was it 63,000 that you're now on the newsletter or something like that?
Yeah. It's fun. It's a lot of nerds out there.
Oh, it's mad. Like, so impressed. So good. And yeah,
thank you, sir.
Like, we'll catch up soon, I'm sure. And we'll have the latest update on how working for yourself is going. I'm keen to keep in touch with all that. But no, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on, CJ. And yeah, all the best for the new project. I'm sure we'll catch up soon.
This has been a blast. Thanks, Adam.
All right. Cheers. Hey again, and thanks for listening. If you enjoyed what you heard today, don't forget to like, review, and subscribe. And for more goodies, head over to adamshilton.com.